Hello and welcome to your ACE Live Continuing Education Series. My name is Jackie Crockford and I will be your host for our presentation today, the 3 R's of recovery. We are going to be talking with our presenter about refueling, rolling, and remodeling, and that presenter is Sam Berry. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Jackie.
So Sam is joining us from Maine. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. This is exciting stuff.
Great. So we are going to be talking with Sam about recovery today. Sam, you've been an ACE Master Trainer for several years.
Yeah, 7 now.
Right?
Yeah.
So presenting a lot of our live workshops. You might have seen him on the road with our ACE live workshops. But tell us why we're going to be talking specifically today about recovery and why that is important for our trainers to understand with their clients.
I was really excited to have this opportunity because when we do the live workshops, we're spending a lot of time on the programming part of the strength and conditioning or movement-based exercise, and not necessarily a lot of time on the refueling techniques, the recovery and rolling. So this is a great time to explore a lot and dig into that stuff.
Great. So just a reminder, you are watching today for free via YouTube. So if you would like to take a look at the chat bar, we are going to be hopefully asking you some questions at the end of today's presentation. So if you do have some questions for Sam, please use that chat link and you can type those questions, or if you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to type in there and I'll be monitoring those throughout the presentation today. Also, just a reminder, if you would like to receive CECs, we'll mention this again after the course is finished, but if you would like to receive your CECs, make sure that you purchase this recorded version and then you will receive your CECs in your My ACE account once you pass the quiz. So with that, Sam, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's talk about recovery.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much today for having me, and really excited for you all to be here and spending a little bit of time with me. Hopefully some of you have had the opportunity to come to some of my live workshops. If not, keep an eye out in the future. We'll be going all over the place in 2018. Really excited for what's to come. Our learning objectives today, as Jackie alluded to, is spending a lot of time on our refueling techniques and optimizing the hard work we put into that training bout or event that you just completed, making sure that we're doing the right rolling techniques and doing a little bit more contemporary styles of foam rolling and self-myofascial release. Then we're going to complement that foam rolling and self-myofascial release with some different remodeling or repatterning to optimize joint range of motion and getting the most out of what we just did in that bout of exercise or event that you just completed or your clients completed. So when we get into optimizing the recovery efforts, we want to make sure that we're leading from the front. And what that means is we're setting qualitative and quantitative baselines for our clients. And it's not just a push-up test, a sit and reach test. It's seeing what kind of competency they have with their squat, how well they can lunge. Do they know how to lunge and be able to weight shift off of the ball of the foot and go into the heel? And once they have that competency, what kind of efficiency do they have on their left versus their right? Once we have some relatively even symmetry and efficiency with different movement patterns, what kind of capacity can they tolerate so that we're not going into compensatory movement patterns and going the path of least resistance? Lastly, and to me, not necessarily the paramount baseline measurement, is the anthropometrics, your body mass index, your body fat percentage goals, and the likes. Make sure that we do those first 3 baselines before we get even into the anthropometrics. Even if that's probably your client's #1 goal, I feel that's probably secondary or tertiary to those other movement baselines that you're going through. So when we go through our recovery sequence, we want to make sure that we're mobilizing first. And this is even at the beginning of a training session or before a bout of exercise, then spending some quality time on static and dynamic motor control or stability, making sure that they can prevent rotation before we create it. After we've built up their stability and complemented their mobility work, we're getting into movement training, not just weight training or resistance training. Gravity is resistance, so anything that's under load, and it's going to be loaded movement training or gravity loaded movement training. After we get our movement training completed and it's well balanced with our 5 basic movement patterns, we get into our metabolic conditioning. That's our high intensity training, your Tabata style training, and other energy system development. what we're going to spend a lot of time on today is the cool down, recovery, and refueling. We're going to get started first with our refueling. When we get into refueling, we've got to first spend time on the front side and making sure that we are hydrating really, really well. I have a lot of early morning clients. This morning I had a client at 5:30 and I made sure that he had at least 16 ounces of water in him before he was working out. I hate to have our clients trying to catch up with our hydration during the training session. If that's the case, it's probably too late and we're not going to optimize that training, and certainly going to fall behind on the recovery aspects at the end of the training and building off of that. So you can go up to 1 ounce of water for every pound of body weight. That's a lot of water. I typically encourage my clients to have between a gallon to up to 1.5 gallons of water, depending on their size and time and ability to do those kind of things. The alkalinity of the water is very important. I'm sure you've seen plenty of that, and there's a lot of different research on alkalinity of water. So the more alkaline it is, the better the pH your body's going to have. That too will help with the recovery efforts. And obviously, if you're going beyond 60 minutes of training and there's a lot of humidity, you want to include some kind of electrolytes. Something like a carbohydrate electrolyte drink. We all know Gatorade. Also, you can go with Smart Water, or heck, you can just put a pinch of sea salt in water, and that will be very helpful as well. There are all kinds of fluid intake recommendations. You can take a look at these. Typically, I want people having about a 16-ounce bottle of water for every pound of water that they lose during training. So if you sweat a lot like I do, I drink a lot of water after I'm done with my training sessions, typically about 32 ounces within the first 30 to 60 minutes after a heavy duty training session. So to complement our hydration techniques and optimizing that part, we need to make sure we're getting our refueling with our macronutrients and our micronutrients. Keep it simple, folks. Don't worry about measuring things out. You have a measuring device and it's right here. It's very simple. Our proteins are the palm of our hand, and for a male, 2 palms is about 1 meal that they should be having, that portion size. For a female, typically about 1 palm size is a significant and sufficient size of a serving. For their complex carbohydrates, what they can cup in their hand is going to be significant. So if they're going to be cooking up some rice or have rice after their workout, whatever they cup in, they can throw into the water and boil, and that should be a sufficient serving for a female. 2 cupped hands for a male. Veggies, it's going to be a 1 fist. Whatever the volume or size of their fist, that's a serving of vegetables. Typically 2 fists for just about everybody. We got to get a lot of those deep greens and leafy vegetables. Your fats are the volume of your thumb. Not just the length of it, but the whole size of your thumb, which is about maybe a teaspoon if you compare the two. So again, protein are your fats, or excuse me, protein is your palm. Complex carbs are your cupped hand. Vegetables are your fist. And your thumb is your fats. You want to be respectful for the different somatotypes and their goals as well. So here's a quick glimpse of some of the different ranges for your different body types. Endomorphs, similar body shape as me, are doing 2 servings typically for males of all of the different macronutrients, and 1 or half that for females. For ectomorphs, your endurance type athletes in those frames are going to have a little bit more complex carbs and a little more fats, a little less fats and proteins. Your mesomorphs, your larger power lifters and people like linemen in football, they're going to have more fats and slightly less carbohydrates in the form of complex carbohydrates. Some additional fueling techniques that really help with recovery for higher level athletes that need to get from fitness to performance goals. We need to identify and correct what kind of micronutrient deficiencies they have. How do you do that? Go to your physician and work with a registered dietitian. I would have a solid network as a trainer. Make sure you have those kind of people within your scope so you can respect your scope of practice and they can do what they do best. Make sure that those deficiencies are honed in before we get into any supplements like branched-chain amino acids, L-glutamine, and creatine. All things you're going to see resources for at the end of this presentation today. There's some really great research that's being done and always reviewed from previous studies. So spend some time taking a look at some peer-reviewed research, not just what you see in Men's Health. Although that's some good stuff, the peer-reviewed stuff is going to give you a lot more statistical significance and give you the real good stuff. Okay? Ultimately, whether you're spending time on supplements or taking vitamins or any kind of fish oils or anything like that, you always have to check out, and is it actually working for you, and is it working for your clients? So ultimately, it's not about what the doctors say, it's how they're feeling and how their body's responding to that. Once we have these refueling techniques dialed in, we can spend a little time on some rolling, okay? So when you're doing self-myofascial release, it's pretty clear that it works. It's interesting. When I first started, that was something only physical therapists did, and now you can find the foam rollers in any department store, and even in Whole Foods I've seen them. It's pretty interesting. But foam rolling and massage tools are giving immediate short-term relief on improving joint range of motion and reducing the delayed onset muscle soreness, as well as improving the recovery in between bouts of exercise. Frequency is key on this. I actually work with several dentists back when I was in Boston, and we came to the conclusion that foam rolling is a lot like brushing your teeth for your muscles. When you go get your teeth clean with your hygienist, it's like going to a massage therapist. So brush your teeth for your muscles. That's what I tell my clients a lot. Spend a lot of time on rolling even at home. So all my clients have foam rollers, and it's a really good gift to give them during the holidays, to give them the gift of health and reinforcing what you spend time on when you're working with them one-on-one. So when maybe they're watching TV, instead of sitting down on the couch, you can plop down on the floor and roll out and make that constructive time. So tools, obviously we've alluded to foam rollers, but there's other really great tools like just a simple lacrosse ball or softball. There are different vibration tools. I know that Hyper Ice has a really cool vibrating tool that you can use. It's a sphere or a foam roller. Really interesting tools, and there are other really great tools you'll see coming out all the time. Use what's financially feasible and what works best for you. What we're going to spend some time on, though, today with my athlete, we'll get on the screen in a moment, is these techniques. Search and destroy. Find the spots that hurt so good, those hot spots that may take your breath away. Don't go to the point where you're losing your breath and you're holding your breath, because that's going to change what we want neurologically, and that's a parasympathetic nervous system response. We don't want that fight or flight, that sympathetic nervous system response. We want to make sure that people can relax and release the tension that they just put themselves through in the training bout of that they just went through. So scan. Work from the foot up to the base of the head, or the back of the neck, and find the spots that hurt so good. If there's any nerve kind of shooting or any thing that doesn't feel like a hurt so good and is actually painful, we don't want to be on there. Also, make sure that if your clients are on any kind of medication, there's no contraindications to doing self-myofascial release. I know that if somebody's on a blood thinner, pretty contraindicated to do self-myofascial release, and you've got to be mindful of that and respectful. Check with their doctor, make sure they're good with it. If they are on any kind of medication or they're a special population, you have to be mindful of that stuff. So what we're going to get into is some of the techniques. I'm going to have Marco come up on the screen here, and we're going to go from the ground up and work on some of his restrictions. So Marco is going to start with the stick. You can use a PVC pipe if that's all you have. That works really well too. He's going to go and put his foot right on top of the roller, and he's going to scan, find some hot spots. When he finds a hot spot, he's going to kind of hang out on that. He's got one right there. He's going to take a big breath in, brace for a second, and add a little bit more pressure down on that roller, and then release that breath, and then release the pressure. And he's going to continue to kind of scan through, and if that releases him, he's going to move on to the next hot spot. When he finds a spot as well, another technique he can do is kind of open and close his toes and move his foot around while he is on the hot spot. Really good technique. Hope you guys are trying this out right now at home. What we're going to do here after is we're going to move up into the shin. So we're working up the foot into the perineals and the anterior compartment of the shin. So he's going to just take that PVC pipe or the stick and go to the outside part of the anterior compartment of the lower leg, scan through the muscle, find those hot spots. He's got one right there. Take that big breath in. He's going to add a little bit more pressure to his tolerance, release it, and release the breath. Scan through, check it out. And he's also not just going to go with the muscle fiber, he's also going to kind of go cross fibering left and right here. So he'll spend as much time as he needs, and sometimes one side might have more tenderness than the other. Spend time on the spots that need it, okay? And that's completely subjective to you and your clients. So from here, I'm going to have him flip onto his hips, sit down, and set the stick aside, and we're going to use this trigger point roller. This is a little bit more aggressive tool. It's a PVC pipe inside, so this is a little bit more dense. If somebody's new to rolling, make sure that they're starting with a softer density roller, and that way they can kind of ease their way into self-myofascial release. So we're going to have this down like this. He's going to put one foot on there first. This may be enough. The weight of his leg might be enough to find some trigger points. It is for me. He's a little bit better at this, so I'm going to have him cross his left foot over his right, kind of where he's resting on the roller. Okay, he's going to, if he wants to get deeper into there and get a little bit heavier hot spot, lift the hips up and roll back and forth. Some of our clients can't tolerate that. Maybe their wrists have some discomfort, or maybe it's just too much. Sitting down on the ground, and if their breathing pattern is not changing and they're feeling that hurts so good, that's good enough. We don't need to go hardcore and get as much discomfort in that area as possible. His breathing pattern is continuing to work. And what he's doing here is he's finding the spot, going a little bit of mobilization in the joint below, and he's doing some cross fibering. So it's kind of finding out what works best for him on this. There's no perfect technique. It's what's releasing and what's effective. So he's going to do that same kind of press down and hold his breath, big breath in. Pressure, pressure, pressure. 4, 3, 2, 1. Release and relax, and then go through a little bit of scan. Cool. Did that release them? Nice. Okay, so Marco and I are going to move over, and we're going to work now from the ankle and the lower leg into the hip flexors. So we're going to go over against the wall because I want Marco to be able to relax his upper body up against the wall and use some of these tools that we have over here. So I'm actually going to have Marco use this kettlebell as a tool, and he loves this one. This is one of his favorites. Not really. We're going to have him take the horn of the handle, and he's going to use that for his TFL and his hip flexors. So he's going to rest this kettlebell on those hot spots that he finds kind of on the outside where their pocket might be. Okay, he's got a spot right there, and he's going to take that breath in. Pressure down on that, little added pressure, not a ton, but enough to feel like it's a little bit more significant, and then take that pressure off, go through a range of motion. A lot of people ask me, what kind of weight should I use? Start with something lighter, maybe 10 pounds, and then if they can tolerate a little bit more, incremental, maybe 10% more weight each time to see how they respond to it and see if it's working for them. Marco's been using this 25-pound kettlebell for a while, so he's pretty acclimated to this tool. And he's just going to kind of work his way down more on the lateral side of the thigh and into the vastus lateralis, a little bit into the rectus femoris after he's spent some time on that TFL and some of the other hip flexors in there. Okay? And he's just working that joint above, so internally and externally rotating at the hip is going to be a really effective tool to cross fiber and to get into some of the mobilization in the joint above it. Cool? Feeling all right? Releasing some? Cool. So let's take that. Thank you. And now Marco and I are going to kind of scoot back to the center, and we're going to take one of these tools. This is a Supernova. This Supernova is something that Kelly Starrett developed with Mobility Wad. Really great tool. It's a pretty advanced rolling tool. The smaller the surface area, the more tender that spot is going to be. So I'm going to have Marco put this on his left outer hip, and he's going to just shift over onto that outer hip piriformis, external rotators of the hip, and he's going to let that knee roll out. He's got a spot right away. It doesn't take much to get into this. So finding that spot, take that breath in, hold it, pressure, and then long exhale, release, and repeat. So you can make big investments into tools like that, or you can just use a softball, a lacrosse ball, heck, even a baseball or a tennis ball. Tennis balls are probably a good start for most folks because it's a little bit softer and gives, and it's very low cost, and you can probably take it from your dog too, and he might be a little bit upset though. But anyway, after we spend some time on the outer hip here, he would go ahead and switch on the other side. We're not going to go too much longer. He could probably spend all day. Every time he comes into the gym, this is the first thing Marco does. 5:30 in the morning, he was rolling out this morning while I'm training my client. I was kind of jealous. So I'm going to have Marco now spend some time on the anterior shoulder. It's really hard to get that spot, and we're going to use the kettlebell. So I'm going to go grab that. Marco's just going to lay down on his back, and we're going to have him lay down with his knees bent. Yep. I'm going to give this to him and slowly have this settle into just to the medial or inside part, so that not on the glenohumeral joint, but slightly in on the upper chest. So he is going to hold on with his right hand, and the left hand's going to help guide that belt onto the pectoralis. So he's just going to kind of rotate the hand and scan through there and wiggle just like he did when he was on the front of the thigh through some of the hot spots there. Now, if this is a tough position, or if you have a female client that's just not comfortable with this, you can work with that softball or the tennis ball and do it up against a wall. Heck, even a medicine ball will work, and you can just get that weight into the wall and roll that way. So he's going to go into some internal and external rotation in the glenohumeral joint when he finds those hot spots. And take that big breath, and then he's going to maybe put a little bit more pressure down on there. Hold it, 3, 2, 1, release, and go back through that internal external rotation. Okay there? Cool. And so what we can do after we're done with this kettlebell, I'm going to just set this over to the side, is we're actually going to use a barbell and work down into the bicep and into the elbow region, where we get a lot of clients that have some medial epicondylitis and some tennis or golfer's elbow. We can work both medial and lateral on this. So he's going to take the meat of the end of the bar and place this like a rolling pin on his bicep, starting closer to the glenohumeral joint, and then work his way down toward the elbow. So he's going to control that load with this hand and kind of roll over a little bit. And he's going to find some hot spots in there. So he's going to do that scan, and he's doing some different rotation in the elbow and even in the shoulder. He's got a spot there. Take a breath in, and then pressure down. 4, 3, 2, 1. Release it and roll. And then he's going to do some elbow flexion and extension. That's a really great one. If you have clients that are have history of biceps tendonitis, or maybe I know a lot of my clients will carry their bags like this, and that's going to shorten up and tighten up that bicep. This is a great way to release it, and not all that pleasant. If a barbell is too much, you can go with a lighter barbell, or heck, you can even just use PVC pipe or like one of those foam body bars that you'll see in most group exercise studios. Really good tool to kind of slowly integrate into this. Again, Marco's pretty experienced in doing this stuff, and has worked through those initial discomforts. So good spot there. You good? Cool. Okay, you're good to go on that one. So thank you. What we want to do now is talk about how much and why do it after the workout. Definitely do some before the workout, but not a ton. You don't need to spend a ton of time. Find the spots that are most tender, maybe before, for like 3 to 5 minutes before a bout of exercise or before your training session with your client. And then after, if they can, 10 minutes plus or minus 5, will be ideal. If they have more time and they need more work, have them spend time on it. You want to do it before you do the repatterning and the remodeling, which we're going to talk about in a moment and show you some techniques. Just as their time constraints will allow them to, make sure that they're doing the SMR throughout the rest of the day if they need to, especially before they go to bed a little bit in the hips and upper back. Really good to do for just a couple minutes, and that's going to help that recovery and reduce that delayed onset muscle soreness for the next day and day after that. So when we get into our remodeling or repatterning, we want to spend some time on now our static stretching. We don't want to spend time on the static stretching at the beginning of the workout. We've certainly through your work with ACE have learned that static stretching can reduce muscle performance before you go into training with your clients. So we want to do a lot more of that and focused efforts on static then, as well as your active isolated stretching, and also complementing it with your proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, PNF stretching. So when you're doing your PNF, we're going to be doing some today that the PNF is just your breath. The contract relax of diaphragmatic breath is going to be hugely effective in releasing a lot of thoracic restrictions. And so what we're going to spend and focus on in the remodeling priorities are ankles, your hips, your thoracic spine, and lastly, the glenohumeral joint. A lot of folks want to dive right into the glenohumeral joint, especially if they have some kind of maybe anterior compartment restriction or impingement. That's probably the last spot we want to spend time on. We want to work more proximal to distal. So hips and thoracic spine, ankles and shoulders usually after that, or with it at the same time. So when we get into our remodeling priorities, we're going to spend some time first on breathing techniques and carry those breathing techniques into some thoracic mobilization strategies. And we're going to work into some different kneeling and half kneeling positions. So Marco is going to come back out and we're going to get into some of those breathing techniques. So we're going to go right on over by that wall that we were on earlier, and he's going to lay on his back and he's going to have his feet up on the wall, and his knees and hips are going to be bent at 90 degrees. So I'm sure you've seen some of the resources in the exercise library for ACE. This is a 90-90, and we're going to do a breathing through the diaphragm. So diaphragmatic breathing. So instead of having his hands up on his chest, I want him to slide his hands down into his abdomen, and he's going to take some big belly breaths. So he's got that kinesthetic feedback of his hands on his belly. So a lot of my clients, I don't know about you, have a really hard time breathing through their diaphragm. And it happens that they also have a lot of pathology and tightness in their upper back and into their neck. So they're what's called apical breathers. And we want to get that breathing from up here down into here. And this is where we start. Get those big breaths in through the nose, and then long exhale out, typically about 5 to up to 10-second breaths if they can. Not just up and down on the hands, but we want them to do some lateral expansion and breathing out into their obliques. So taking some time here and having them discover what breathing is and what it should be. If you look at toddlers, you don't see them breathing up in their shoulders, you see them breathing through their bellies. And that's what we want to restore with all our clients, is that they know how to allocate their breath. So Marco's done a few breaths. Now what we're going to have him do is carry that breathing pattern into some thoracic mobility techniques. He's just going to roll over, and we're going to go over back to the middle of the room and get him into an extended child's pose. So his knees are going to be wide apart, and his hips are going to be back on his heels, and he's going to extend those arms out in front of him. And he's going to take some of those big breaths. I want his breathing to go into from his diaphragm into his thigh if he can get back into it and get that lateral expansion that we were just working on over on the wall. So some big breaths here. As he exhales, he's going to reach those arms forward a little bit more to his tolerance, and then take another breath in. So each exhale, he's going to take up some of the slack that he might gain from his exhale and releasing some of the intercostals, serratus, anterior, posterior, and in the lats. Okay. From here, his arms are at 12 o'clock. I'm going to have him bring his arms over to 11 o'clock and also flex his spine laterally. Okay. Not too far. I don't want him going crazy. That's great. Start there, and then he can work his way over to the left a little bit more. He's getting a big stretch here right now, so I want him to focus his breath into here. And if you and your clients are comfortable with it, give him some feedback. Breathe into my hand there, Marco. Come on, get into it. Get into it. Exhale. Release and take up that slack a little bit, creep forward. Good. Just a little bit at a time. And they don't want to force it. If their breathing starts to get tense and they are contracting the muscle, you're defeating the purpose of that mobilization. So let their breath be their governor, okay? And go ahead and switch over to the other side. I'll typically have my clients take 30 seconds of this, or about 5 breath cycles, and that's about 5 seconds breath, maybe up to 7 seconds. They're taking their time with this. So go ahead, take those big breaths, exhale, and you can hear him taking that big exhale out. When he's doing that exhale, that's your PNF. So inhale is your contract, exhale is your relax and release, and he's going to take up that slack nice and slow. Good. Feeling good? Okay. Now, from this child's pose position and modification of the child's pose, if your clients can't get into this fully flexed position, because this is full hip flexion, knee flexion, and we're in plantar flexion. If they have any pathology there, maybe have them get it up into a quadruped position, hands and knees, so he's more like a 90-90 position. And you can have their arm up on a box or a chair, and they can reach out and do that same flexion without getting that stress in the knees and hips. So that's a good modification for that position. Marco would just bring his arm up like he's going to shake somebody's hand. It would be resting on a box here, and then he can do that reach here. That's a good modification if needed. Okay, good. So the child's pose, there's your modification. You can do that lateral reach. I'm going to have him now do what's called a pretzel stretch, named after Brett Jones, pretty brilliant guy. He's a pretty strong dude. So you're going to lay on your side, Marco, facing this way. And making sure we have a couple other props here. We want Marco to have one leg on a roller or some kind of elevation so he's not all the way down on the ground. I'll explain it to you in a second. And a pillow or a rolled up towel for the head. Marco is going to roll over to his left side, and he's going to take this foam roller, and he's going to place his top leg, his right leg, on top of the roller. So his hip and knee are at 90 degrees. And I'm going to take that Eric's pad, put it under his head so he's not getting a bunch of stress in his cervical spine. From here, Marco's left hand is going to go on top of his right knee. It's like a game of Twister, so follow along at home. You're going to take this right hand and you're going to grab the left foot. So he's going to bend that left knee, grab at the ankle joint, and then open up the shoulders, turn the head, and pull that leg back as far as he can tolerate. Okay? Now he's going to just settle into that. Make sure that you or your clients are not feeling any stress in the lumbar spine and there's not too much torque on the neck. Now, if they can't get into this position because they have some restrictions, you can loop a towel around the ankle and hold on to that. We want to make sure that they're not shrugging and trying to fight here. We want to let the foot almost pull the shoulder away from the ear. So he's going to take some big breaths in. There's your PNF cycle. Exhale and release. And the goal is letting this top shoulder, for him it's his right shoulder, settle down toward the ground, making sure that the leg stays on the roller and his hips are not twisting or torquing. They should be truly stacked on top of each other. So for a lot of people, they're going to get a stretch through the thoracic spine. They're going to get a stretch in the outer hip, and they are probably going to get some kind of stretch on the leg that's back behind and flexing in the knee on the left for Marco. So let's turn over this way, Marco, and let people see what it looks like from the other side. So flip it over. So he's going to roll over, top leg here, and right hand on left knee, left hand grabs right, so you can take a look here, and then he's opening up toward his left. Big breath in, exhale, and release. Big breath, and as he exhales, watch that left shoulder settle into the ground a little bit. Nice. He's not forcing it, he's just letting his breath do the work on that. Okay, really, really important. Let that breath do the work. Great, very good. Feeling all right? It's a little bit better range of motion on that left side there, Marco. Take some time and spend some more time on that right. Okay, so from here we're gonna have another continuation of thoracic mobility. I'm gonna have Marco get up into what's called a tall kneeling position. And you can just face off to your left there, good. Get really tall. And what Marco is going to make sure of is he's going to have his knees, his hips, his shoulders, and his ears all stacked so they're not flexing in the hips. Super tall position. If people don't quite get that, or if you have a hard time getting them into that position, it's real simple. I put my hand on his head, push up into my hand, get tall. And that's just going to give them that kinesthetic cue of elongating the spine. It's really important that we're not getting any flexion in the spine in this position. Get them set up and really dialed into this posture. For a lot of folks, this is really tough to get into because they've got a lot of restriction in the front of their thighs. He may be feeling a little bit of a stretch in the anterior part of his leg, and that's not uncommon because he's going into hip extension, what we don't get a lot of. Okay, he's going to take his hands and interlace them behind his head, keeping that tall posture, big proud chest. Okay, and all I'm going to have him do is he's going to rotate to his right as far as he can, keeping that tall posture. And he's going to side bend toward his right, like he's doing an oblique crunch. And now he's going to take a big breath in here, through that left side specifically, exhale it, get tall again, and then he's going to take up the slack. Good. Side bend. Big breath in. Big, come on. And then exhale, get tall again. Take up that slack. Nice rotation, man. Good. Side bend. Big breath, get into it. Exhale, get tall. And take up the slack. Nice. Good. Let's try a little bit on the other side. You okay? Good. Cool. Now, if you feel like your clients are flexing, extending, and doing other compensatory patterns while he's getting back to neutral, be clear with the cueing. It's not something you just let them go with it, because if he or anybody else I'm working with starts to flex or they aren't getting the breath specifically through the diaphragm, we're going to go into that compensatory pattern. We're going to get that law of facilitation, that path of least resistance. So be really mindful of that stuff. So rotate, stay tall, side bend toward me. Take that big breath in, right down in here. Get into it. Good, nice. And then get tall, exhale, take up the slack. Good. Don't let, so he wants to use this elbow to get across. So I want to keep those arms open. So he's getting the rotation here and not using the elbow. Okay, side bend. Get into it. Big breath in. Exhale, get tall, long exhale, take up the slack. Good. It may be a couple of degrees, it may be a whole bunch. He's getting more range of motion with the big breath. So side bend, come on, one more. Keep that tall, keep that elbow back. Big breath in. Exhale, get tall. Rotate a little bit more. Cool. So if your clients have a relax out of that one, nice job. That's some work. They will sweat when they're doing this. It's not an easy thing to do. So if kneeling is tough for them, you can get them into what's called short kneeling, like this. You can put them on an Eric's pad or some kind of padding to make it a little bit less uncomfortable for the knees. You can also have your clients and yourself get into a seated position in a chair, get tall and take a yoga block or maybe a soft medicine ball, put it between the knees and squeeze the knees together on there. And that's going to help keep their pelvis in a neutral alignment while they do that same rotation and flexion. Really cool technique. It's helped me out with my thoracic mobility quite a bit. So what we can do from that tall kneeling position is we can transition now into some of our anterior hip and ankle mobility strategies. So what I'm going to have Marco do here is he's going to get into that tall kneeling position. And what I want him to think about is not swinging the leg through. And all he's going to do is what I'm doing right now. Take that left foot forward, shift into it, staying tall. So draw the left foot straight ahead. And he's going to shift forward, keeping the shoulders over the hips, and go as far as he can until he feels like that ankle wants to lift, or the heel wants to lift up off of the ground. Yes, his knee's going past his toe, but his kneecap is staying in line with his second and third toe. He's not letting the knee roll in this way or bow out way out this way. He's staying all toes, knees, and hips in the same line. You'll hold it for a couple seconds and then you'll draw back. Now, if Marco was doing this with a compensation, he'd swing his leg through. Go ahead and do that. I don't want to see that, because then we're losing some of the essence of the dynamic motor control, because it's not just about the mobility here. We're getting a lot of balance. And especially if you have somebody that says, I can't lunge. Well, this is a really great way to introduce that split stance position and work into their lunge pattern without having them actually doing lunging. Then when you finally have them do a lunge, there's no big deal. They don't feel the pain that they used to when they did it, when they didn't have that movement competency. Really important stuff. So go ahead and do a couple more there. Stay tall. He's taking that breath in, and he's going to shift into it. Exhale. Hold it for 2 to 3 seconds. And for a lot of folks, they're going to get a big stretch here. They may get a big stretch in the front of the side. They may get a little bit of stretch on the adductors on that forward leg too. It's going to be different for everybody and their fascial restrictions. Okay, slide it back. So let's stay right here now, Marco. And this is a great transition from that sagittal plane movement to kind of transverse plane movement. So Marco's going to get his knees a little bit wider apart and his feet as well. Okay, so what he's going to do is he's going to do a rotational kneeling to half kneeling position and get a little bit into the adductors, still getting some closed chain dorsiflexion, and work on some of the hip flexors as well. So he's going to pivot off his big toe and rotate to his right. So right knee comes up off the ground, he opens up to his right, and then he's going to shift to the right, staying tall, get a little groin stretch both on the down leg and on the up leg, and then drop that knee back down. And then he's going to come over this way and do the other side. Open up. His foot's not repositioning, he's just pivoting his toe. So he's not going this way, he's just kind of opening up that toe and opening up toward the way he's going to rotate. Good, do a couple more. Trying not to lose any of his posture, staying tall, and then shifting over. Good, good, good. That's a really great groin stretch. I love to surf, and this is one of my warm-ups every time I go out. Good. Keep that shift, shift, shift. Again, his knee is staying in line with his second and third toe when he's shifting, trying not to let the knee cave into the inside of that big toe. Good. How does that feel? Cool? Thanks, Marco. Appreciate it. So what we want to make sure of is that the speed is slow, methodical, and you're taking your time with it. Don't rush these movements. You know, the first couple times that you're working with your clients on these, don't worry about rushing through all the ones that I just showed you. I've been using these techniques for a while, and I'm still learning a lot about them myself. So you want to make sure that they are not feeling any pain. They're not going into any compensatory patterns or compensations, because we don't want that law of facilitation. We want them to get some authentic range of motion without feeling pain. So when we talk about our recap for the 3 R's, we need to spend a lot of time on the front end. Remember, we need to get that hydration and the refueling, making sure that an hour or two before they're working out, they're getting that fuel that they need. Remember your portion sizes. Your palm is your protein, your thumb is your fats, a cupped hand is your complex carbohydrates, and a fist are your vegetables, okay? Females, 1 hand, males mostly for 2, depending on your goals. Whether you want weight loss or weight gain, that's going to vary on your number of portion sizes. With each meal, you want to achieve something similar to that ratio every single time. Palm, cupped hand, fist, and thumb, okay? With your hydration, look for something that's a little bit more alkaline with your water and pH. If it's over 60 minutes and it's humid, add some electrolytes. and see what works for you. Make sure you're respecting the scope of practice. Work with a registered dietitian on any additional supplements or finding any kind of micronutrient deficiencies. When you're working on your foam rolling, search and destroy. Use tools that are appropriate for your client's expertise or experience with that, as well with your own expertise. Do it on yourself first, and then take your time and explore with your clients slowly and methodically. Don't just rush into it blindly, and after you're done with this, in this live webinar, don't just throw it with your next client. Do a little bit on yourself if you're not already doing it right now. After we're done with that rolling, we want to spend time on your remodeling and spending time on the ankles, hips, thoracic spine, and the glenohumeral joint. And you're going to get a lot of good stuff out of those techniques I had Marco working on. If you have somebody that has a lot of thoracic restriction and have a tough time breathing, spend a lot of time on their breathing. They may think it's useless and a little bit frustrating, but on the back end, later on down their training, they're going to really be grateful that you spent that time on their breathing technique as they achieve the goals that they came to you for in the first place. So I think right about now is where we get into a lot of questions, and I'm sure you guys have an abundance. So I'm going to bring Jackie back on, and we're going to answer some of the questions.
Yeah. We do have a lot of questions coming in. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marco. He's over here recovering nicely.
You can have that.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we do have a lot of questions coming in, and if you have a question for Sam, please make sure to type that in your questions box. It is a chat bar on your live webinar here. And one of the questions coming in from Hannah. Thank you for your question, Hannah. This is a perfect question to kind of be talking about this topic and making sure that our clients understand the importance. So if you have a client that is maybe like many clients that really isn't buying into this right away. I don't want to do foam rolling. I don't want to spend time on that. Can't we just get to the meat of the workout? How do you talk to your clients about the importance of this and get them to buy into how important this is for them?
I think they'll appreciate it most, Hannah, when you have some level of relatedness with them. Like the analogy I had with brushing your teeth. I tell them all the time, I get the same challenges from my clients, and it's an opportunity for you to ask them things that they do on a daily basis. Do you brush your teeth? Yes. Why? And you ask them, and they start to answer their challenges right away. So they do it because they want their teeth to stay healthy and their gums to stay healthy. And it's really no different with the foam rolling or self-myofascial release. You're keeping the health of the muscle and reducing metabolic waste, and you can use all kinds of 25-cent words, but it really doesn't matter. It's in one ear and out the other. They want to hear that it's going to help them with their goals. I use the analogy of when you're cutting down a tree, you can be as strong and have the best axe in the world, but if it's not sharpened every once in a while, it's going to be a lot more work than it needs to be. And that's what the foam roller is for and the self-myofascial release.
Great. So really understanding what's important to your client and finding a way to relate it to that.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Really
so
important
great
stuff.
Question, Hannah. And then another question, a couple people are asking about the knees. And we have a lot of clients that have knee issues or back issues or shoulder issues. We kind of addressed a few of those, but specifically with the knees, if foam rolling can be helpful or more hurtful depending on what's going on there. And again, staying within the scope of practice, we need to make sure we have, if there is a diagnosis that's coming from a doctor or PT, something like that. But what's your thought around some of this for the knees?
Well, I can relate with that. I tore my ACL about 10 years ago, and I had a lot of restriction in my hip, the joint above. And usually, if the joint above or below are restricted, the joint immediately beside it is going to be affected. And that's what happened to me. So I kind of relate it for my clients. If we have restrictions in the hip or the ankle, the knees are going to be affected. And so when you're doing your self-myofascial release on the joints above and below, it's going to help the knees. Now, if they have a hard time getting up and down off the ground like a lot of my senior clients do, I'll have them just sit down in a chair and spend some time with one of those rolling sticks that I had Marco first working with, or maybe even a PVC pipe. That's going to be effective as well. So I want them to take time on the spots that they can tolerate and something they have the patience for. So you have to, there's the art and the science of integrating self-myofascial release to your clients, and that's where you as the fitness professional have to have the art. You know the science, it's getting them to buy into the science.
Right, great. So another question that I have actually is around a little bit of the scope of practice. So we saw Marco doing all of this himself, right? And because you mentioned that foam rolling can be a little, or going to see your massage therapist rather can be like going to see the dental hygienist, right? So this is important to do for the clients for themselves. You as the fitness professional aren't the one who is doing this, and kind of talk a little bit about why that's important.
Good call. You can feed a person fish if you go fishing for them, but ultimately they're going to never starve if they know how to fish themselves. When I'm working with clients early on in training, I set the precedent that they need to learn these things on their own so that we can get into the meat and potatoes of the workout. I do not like spending time watching somebody foam rolling. I want to make sure that they've done it before or they're doing it around our workouts. And I always check in. Did you do your self-myofascial release? Yes, great. Let's get to the workout. I don't want to sit them down and do all the techniques I did with Marco unless if they haven't been doing it, then I'm going to hold them accountable. That's going to frustrate them, and they're going to start doing it on their own so they can get into the stuff they came to you in the first place for, and that getting a good sweat and getting a good workout.
Right. Great. Yeah. And then along the lines of, and the barbell was a great example of this, and as you mentioned, something that is a little bit more advanced for somebody that's been working out and understands how much that weighs and kind of how to control that weight. These tools and techniques are important because the client themselves can monitor their own intensity and their own pressure.
Exactly, Jackie. When you have a massage therapist working on you, sometimes you're at the mercy of them. And if you don't have good feedback loops with your massage therapist, they might be going in too hard, and then you may be protecting and contracting.
Right.
This is a way for you to govern the pressure and the tolerance to that. So you've got to take your time with that and be mindful with them and teaching them what the good discomfort is and what the bad discomfort is, and making sure that they know that if they're feeling nervous, kind of electrical stuff, that they're getting off of that, and it's just something that, that's like, that hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It feels good.
Right. It hurts so good.
Hurts so
said.
good. Exactly.
Right. Perfect.
Exactly.
So one more question that we have coming in, and this is kind of an overarching, just who do we use this for? Would there be any client that this might be indicated for, specifically the foam rolling, because the remodeling stuff can take a little bit into the dynamic warm-up of some of the workouts potentially, or cooling down after, as you mentioned. So is there anyone that this would be contraindicated for?
I think there's, like I alluded to before, Jackie, somebody that's on some kind of blood thinner or has anemia, if they've just gone through cancer treatments, those are all folks that I would definitely not do it with. Somebody, a female that's in their second or third trimester, certainly you have to be really mindful, even in their first trimester, especially on the lower legs. You want to be careful with the venous pooling of blood. Always default to the physician if you're not sure. There's a lot of good resources. Like I said, have that network. If you have some osteopaths, physical therapists, athletic trainers, get a network. Make sure that they know what they're talking about and they respect your scope of practice too. And so you guys can get a great working relationship and a good referral network. I say that with all my live workshops. Get your group, get your team, because it's not just you. You may know a lot of stuff, but you've got to respect that scope of practice and build off of that.
Great, yeah, and a perfect thing to kind of end this with is understanding your scope of practice and making sure that you have that referral network. Perfect. So We're gonna kind of keep moving on here. I know a lot of people have questions about how to obtain the CEC, so I'm gonna mention that in just a second. If you would like to continue the conversation with Sam, his contact information is on your screen, and you can contact him with more questions, see where he's gonna be at with some of our ACE Live webinars and live workshops. And we also are going to be continuing the conversation on our ACE Fitness Facebook page with Sam. So that chat is up and live right now. So if we didn't quite get to your question today, feel free to go to our ACE Fitness Facebook page, and you can type your question in there for Sam,
Love to
and
hear from you.
he'll be getting to those over the next couple of days. And as you mentioned, some of the science is very important behind this. So if you'd
Absolutely.
like to look into some of this science that Sam alluded to today, the resources are on your slide, and if you would like to get into that a little bit more, you can dig into those peer-reviewed research articles, because that's where the meat and potatoes is,
Got it.
right?
PubMed.
Yes, great resource as well. So you can purchase this recorded version, and I'll talk about that in just a second, and then you'll receive this slide with the resources on it. If you would like to receive a little bit more information, if you want some more courses that have to do with recovery and working with athletes, specifically around foam rolling and things like that, we have a variety of other courses for you at ACE Fitness. One of them is our sports conditioning specialist program, and then as you can see on your screen, a few other courses as well, and those will be also provided in the learning management system that we have if you would like to purchase today's live class. So feel free to take a look at those if you would like some more information. And just a reminder, you are watching today for free, so Sam and I appreciate you taking the time to join us. And if you would like to receive the CECs, you'll receive 0.1 credits, 0.1 CECs for the passing the quiz after you purchase today's live presentation. So you can do that at acefitness.org/past webinars, and you can make the purchase there. And if you pass that quiz, you'll receive your credits within your My ACE account. So that is how you'll receive those CECs for today. And just a reminder that we do have another live class, live webinar coming up next month, and that is with Andrea Leonard. She is the foremost expert in cancer and exercise, and she's going to be talking about understanding thyroid disease. So we look forward to having her here next month. Please make sure you continue to connect with us. Like I said, Sam, you're going to be joining us on the live Facebook chat.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Right, so type in your questions for Sam. You can, again, let us know what you liked about today's presentation and any other topics that you'd like to see on our live webinars. So make sure you check in with us, and thank you, Sam, for your time today.
Thanks, Jackie. Appreciate it.
Let's get people moving.